Hey everyone, Matt Landfair here with Primary and Secondary. Welcome to ModCast, episode numbers 357. We are going to be talking about 357 Magnums. You know everyone on the panel. We have Caleb, we have Bryan with a Y, we have Darryl, we have Chuck, Haggard. We've been talking for, an hour and a half, and it's just been awesome. But we haven't been talking about the topic. So there are going to be a couple things that I'll be able to edit out and use for little clips. But we're going to be talking about 357. I have a list of potential subtopics to go into, but Darryl has something to specifically talk about 357. So take it away, Darryl. And then he dies.
Of course.
The big dog.
Okay,
real thing.
Yeah. There we go.
So you're going to try and focus that or whatever?
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
Oh, God, stop.
This is the actual real thing. It's a 3.5-inch registered Magnum. This was carried by a Louisiana sheriff back in the 30s. This is the first 357 Magnum. They were registered Magnums in frame. They were basically a hand-built bespoke gun from Smith & Wesson, and they were the ultimate handgun of the time. And this was a real goal of mine, is to get one of these things. And it is I tried to set it up almost like General Patton's with the grip adapter that fills the sinus, and this has elk stag instead of ivory, but it's very similar to George Patton's gun. I have actually shot this quite a bit. It had no problem doing the 5 rounds, 5 seconds into a playing card on the Tom Givens drill that they do. I absolutely love this thing. It shoots terrific, and it's like I said, it was made in the 1930s and actually carried as a street gun in that era. So that's the starting point of history. Cool. And real 357 Magnum was designed to go in end frames, so that's a good place to start as well on the topic. So that's one of my pride and joys.
That's awesome.
You just had to show that off and make me.
Yes, I did.
Make me look at my bank account.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so you specifically said a registered Magnum. What exactly does that mean?
So back in the 30s, when those guns were created, you ordered the gun from Smith & Wesson, and then it was registered. There was a card that would be sent in to Smith by the owner, but you could order them with whatever barrel length you wanted. They all started out, I believe, as 8 3/8-inch guns, and were just cut to whatever the owner or the person who ordered the gun wanted. They would regulate, you got whatever sights you wanted of various types that were available. This one has the Bowman sight that was that came kind of from the FBI guns. But you could get King sights on them. You could get all sorts of different configurations. And then they would sight the gun in with the ammo you wanted, and at the distance you wanted that gun zeroed. So one of the other registered Magnums I have was made for a guy. He was it's kind of after Caleb's heart. He was in a Florida lawman, and
I was really concerned about where you were going when you said Caleb's heart. I was like, there's so many directions
he was a cop from Florida who shot on the Rebel shooting team. So they used to do a big match between the Rebels and the Yankees back in the day of the 30s and 40s, and he was on the official Rebel shooting team. I have pictures. They got their Confederate flags, the whole night, all the stuff you couldn't do now. And weirdly, like, his gun was zeroed on a 357 Magnum, 6-inch registered Magnum. He had him zero that thing, if I remember right. It was like 148 match ammo at 25 yards. It was literally designed as a pure bullseye gun. So, but it's kind of cool with that one. I've got like traffic tickets the guy wrote, and impounding vehicles, and
cool.
A lot of stuff sort of in the package of the province that came with the gun. But in that era, these were literally, I have probably the first one ever shipped to Southern California. When I got into this, the first gun I ever bought it that was a high-end investment grade gun is a 3.5-inch registered Magnum that was carried at LAPD for 35 years. Its serial number, its registration number 40, probably the first one shipped to SoCal. And it was, when I got the gun, it was kind of a mystery background, like they didn't want anybody to know the real history on it. I pulled a big fat Packmeyers off it, and I go, oh my God, it's round butted and checkered. Somebody ruined this gun. I come to find out the guy who ruined the gun was a neighborhood gunsmith named Frank Packmeyer. So that gun was ordered by a beat cop in Los Angeles before they were even available. And, they cost a house payment back then, at least. And it was ordered as a 6-inch gun. And what happened is the guy got promoted to be a detective. He took it to the neighborhood gunsmith, which was Frank Packmeyer, who put in a 3.5-inch barrel that was serial numbered to the gun from Smith, a factory barrel. They numbered back to the original, had it round butted, hand checkered, custom grips, the whole thing. And the guy carried that gun for 35 years. And talking to some people at LAPD, there was 2 guys who carried those into the 70s, and both were legit human hunting machines. Yeah. The other one was carried by one of the first guys in the original SIS unit. Apparently, he had been in so many successful shootings. The chief of police gave him a special award that was a black diamond. So, these guns were the guns gunfighters carried. Because most guys, when you got promoted to detective back then, you went out and you got a Colt detective special or something like that. And this guy took his 6-inch registered Magnum and had it converted to a snub. So that was like one of our people.
That's awesome.
So, but yeah, these were designed to shoot a very, very high-speed round. Most of the 357 back then was 1,400 feet per second, 357 Magnum, and was originally designed as a hunting gun. That kind of a lot of the serious gunfighters decided that they're good for hunting, all right. So that's sort of where these things came from.
Yeah, and so it was originally Keith who developed it.
No, Sharp, I think is the guy's name. I'm trying to remember, but it was done with actually DB Wesson and that whole project. But there was, I'm blanking because I'm old, but I think the guy's name was Sharp. That was the originator of the cartridge. All it was a punched out 3844. They just lengthened 3844 a little bit. The guns already existed in the 3844 heavy duty and the 3844 outdoorsman, and the registered Magnums were simply outdoorsmans that were chambered in the new cartridge, which was just a little bit longer than the 3844 heavy duty round, which was really like kind of a 38 special plus P plus plus.
Yeah.
So if you get back into, they didn't have as many lawyers and things back then, but Keith was, I don't want to say he was involved, but he was a driver in that. If you look at, if you've never read your Elmer Keith, if you want to get in the history of how we got to be where we were today, we know that the 38 Long Colt was a military cartridge, and famously it didn't work on the Moros in 1890s, which is quite frankly BS. That's misrepresented.
The Army can't shoot.
Yes.
Well, no. So like Claude Warner and I have both read the original reports that came out of the Philippines. The 38 Colt didn't work real well. The 30-40 Krag rifle also didn't slow them down. And then they got the 45 Colts that they we're going to get the 45 Colts into the hands of the guys and that'll fix the problem. That didn't work either. The only thing that reliably worked was 12 gauge buckshot at close range. So oddly enough, I was just reading a book that Keith Jones sent me, who is should be more famous than he is. He's a cop in Metro Indianapolis for 38 years, I think, multiple gunfight survivor, things like that. But he sent me a book that from the Victorian era British Army when they were carrying 5.77 caliber revolvers and 4.76 caliber revolvers. Guess what they were bitching about when they were dealing with like people in various tribes?
Ineffective. Lack
of stopping power. So they were shooting people with like 4.76s and 4.55s, and it wasn't, so it's always, placement is a problem, bullet performance less so, but back then everybody was basically shooting round nose lead, so penetration really wasn't a problem. But oddly enough, they were always also complaining. You'll get a kick out of this, Caleb. I'm going to show you this book. You know what they were bitching about with revolvers? Lack of reliability. You couldn't count on them. So
yeah, of course.
They were, some of these guys said, those newfangled revolvers weren't reliable, so you had to carry one of those Howdaw pistols. It was it's basically a double barrel sawed off shotgun or sawed off rifle that in 5.77 rifle caliber that they carried.
So really, what they should have been carrying was like the more things change, right? It's like revolvers aren't reliable, semi-autos aren't reliable. Got to carry a revolver as a backup. I'm sure that at some point I'm going to be worried that my fucking phase pistol isn't reliable, and I'll have a goddamn 92 shoved down the back of my pants just in case.
Oh, but the Beretta 92s aren't reliable either.
Right.
Just ask
Nothing's
anybody.
reliable.
Fair enough.
Oh, you remember there was even a Star Trek episode where which one was it? Mr. Sulu reverted to a revolver, and one of the phasers weren't working, so he used a revolver. that was an actual in a Star Trek episode.
That is it's surprisingly nerdy cut from Chuck Haggard.
Yes, it is.
The advantage that I have on that one that you don't, Caleb, is
you were alive when the episode aired.
Yes. It's not just Chuck. There's another one who saw those right when they came out. If you held the antenna right on the TV.
Oh, good.
Chuck and I were probably both the remote control for our parents.
That's what I was gonna say. You guys were probably the remotes back then. Yeah.
Yeah. You run it. My dad would be like, "Boy, run over there and change a channel." You had 3 channels, and you had to pick one.
That's
4,
what
5,
your
and
children
9.
were for. Yeah.
So I wanted to hit on, because you asked that question, and a lot of people might not know, Matt, we went from a 38 long Colt in the military. So Smith & Wesson wanted to improve that, and they came out with the 38 Smith & Wesson Special 1898, originally black powder round, then loaded with smokeless powder, which is why the case is so long, because black powder is less powerful. It's less energy dense than smokeless powder, so you need to pack a bunch of it in there. So 38 Special became very popular very quickly. So then later, guys like Keith, there were 2 things going on. Elmer Keith was shooting very large animals as a cowboy in places like Montana and Wyoming and things like that, shooting elk and game like that. So he was hot rodding his rounds. So he was a driver for 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, 41 Magnum. He hot loaded 45 Colts, probably blew up a few guns doing that. But had some pretty famous stuff, like taking a wounded elk at over 600 yards with a 45 Colt, heavy loaded 45 Colt revolver, because, he practiced for stuff like that. So the other thing was near and dear to Darryl's heart was the gangster era. Cars back then were built out of like really heavy duty steel. They didn't worry about things like gas mileage, that sort of thing. So when you're shooting at Bonnie and Clyde or whoever, the gangsters, the original 38 Special was in fact effective on people. If you, to steal a quote from Charles Askins in his book, the 38 Special round nose lead, which a lot of people say is ineffective, but Charles Askins said it was a hairy chested man killer. But it didn't penetrate the cars of the day back then. So between Elmer Keith hot rod and stuff, and them, people knowing how to load ammo, and then the factories wanting to boost the ammo to help the law enforcement out with that mission. Rounds like the 38 Super was invented from the 38 Colt, the 38 ACP, and then the 38/44. And that was called the 38/44 because it was a 38 special, just a 38 special. But you were supposed to shoot it in the 44 frame, which is what later became the N frame. So the 44 caliber, the 45 caliber revolver frame, the big guns like the one that Darryl held up, that was the 44 caliber frame, which was eventually like N and K and all of that. They started because if you go back then, models didn't exist, like the Model 10, which is famous, things like that. They didn't exist yet. So anyway, we had 38/44 ammo. And interestingly enough, my best friend in high school, his dad was a trooper in Kansas, which is a fairly new agency. They only started that in the 30s, but his first duty gun was a 38/44 Smith & Wesson. It was the one, I forget what model it turned into, Darryl, but it's the one that looked like an N-frame Model 10, the fixed sights and all that.
Heavy duty.
And it's just the 38/44 heavy duty. I think it became like the Model 20 or 21, something like that.
So was the adjustable sights the Outdoorsman? Wasn't that?
Yes. That was like the model. So one was like the Model 20 and the other was the 21, and they just kind of fell out of favor because once you got 357 mag, you didn't really need those, if that makes sense. But the original Austin PD guns, I have one of the Austin PD 38/44s as well. So a lot of PDs used them. They were a very popular police gun of those eras.
Kansas Highway Patrol issued those, and he had a box of his ammo, and it reminded me of your Bonnie and Clyde presentation because it was Winchester, Super Police, metal piercing ammunition. So he was basically issued armor piercing ammo as his duty round because you were going to shoot up bad guys in cars. And then I think the liability bug. So if we go back to 1898, how many guns were built on a black powder frame, didn't have the metallurgy, things like that. So eventually when they're going to standardize, we're really going to hot rod this thing because a 38/44 would push a 158 grain at something like 1,100 feet per second. It was loaded hot. And the 357 Magnum, they wanted to push harder than that, like 1,250, 1,300, 1,400 feet per second. I think 1,400 was out of a 6.5-inch barrel. But so they decided to stretch the 38 special case exactly 1/10 of an inch. Now, the 357 Magnum would not fit in those old black powder rated guns. And there was a lot of cheap copies. Once Smith & Wesson came out with it, then other people like, there's the break barrels and there's the Spanish guns and things like that. So imagine if you put a high pressure round in one of those guns, those black powder guns might blow it up. So Smith & Wesson in a very smart move, stretched the case, called it a 357 Magnum because that was super sexy. Magnum actually coming from, weirdly enough, that's not a gun thing. It was the Magnum champagne bottle.
Yep.
Right.
That the Magnum champagne bottle was extra big. So 357 Magnum, and they tied it to their super high-end gun. And that's how we got to be where we were. So the dual purpose was shooting up like Bonnie and Clyde or Dillinger in their heavy duty car that they're getting away in, or guys like Elmer Keith shooting elk and things like that. And I'm going on memory here, but I know originally when they came out with the prototypes and they were trying it out, some of the Smith & Wesson guys, I forget if they shot moose or a polar bear or all the above or whatever, but they took it hunting.
They were hunting everything with them.
Yeah. You can almost kill anything that has ever
in North
walked
America,
the face of the earth.
Well, and that's what. So three things. First thing, backing up to the heavy loaded 38 specials. if you want to go out today and buy that load, Buffalo Bore makes a 38 Special Outdoorsman, which is 158 grain lead semi wad cutter hard cast bullet going 1150 1200 feet per second, which is a 357 Magnum. It is like
it's 38 plus P plus.
And seeing it in gel is amazing. It keeps on going.
I shot no shit. I shot that through a block of I was doing a 38 special ballistics test. And I was testing Federal Punch and some other like current production stuff. And I had some of that and I was like, let's just see what happens. And I freaking cracked a round out of it. It went through an entire 16-inch block. I was like, okay, cool. I had another block. I put another block behind it. It went through 32 inches of this is also after defeating 4-layer denim. It went through all of this shit and just kept going. And I was like, oh, it's an 88 Magnum.
Yes, it goes through places of education.
Right. We don't say the rest of that line anymore. Second thing, and this is backtracking off of this, but I don't tell you guys this now, I will fucking forget. Darryl, I have 2 ultralight 22 Magnums with 2-inch barrels, and I have decided out of the magnanimousness of my presence that I'm going to raffle those guns off at the revolver roundup.
No, you're not. You're sending them to me. I've had those on order for how long?
Oh, these are stainless though. You wanted the black ones.
As long as they're ultralight, I don't care.
Spray paint.
They are in fact ultralight. All right, I actually have 4, so I'm sending 2 to the roundup.
That's a great idea, though.
And then 2 to me and Dolan, so we can use them during the roundup because we've been waiting longer.
It's fucking, watch by the time that this, from when I've said this, I will wake up after they roll our fucking accounting books over and I'm going to be in Idaho for 3 days and they'll be gone. So hopefully, but I got these 2 locked in. So
we're in Idaho.
Okay. Dave and I are set. Hammer Forge grips. We're going to be running them.
Now back to the 357 thing. One of the things that one of the reasons I still love 357, even though I don't run it that often, is specifically that, right? Like if I have a revolver that is chambered in 357 Magnum and like a 4-inch service gun, like a Taurus Tracker or a GP100 or something like that, I can run that all the way up to 200 grain hard cast, just rounds that are unpleasant to shoot even out of a full-size gun, but that will go long ways through most things that walk on 4 legs in North America.
Or 2.
I can, you could stack up. You could stack up dirt bags end to end, like in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where he shoots those guys and it goes to like 5 dudes with a 9mm. You could do that for real with a 200 grain 357 Magnum. But like, I love that I have the capability of doing that, or going down to some of to a 38 special, for example, something like that. And then there's the carbine applications as well. But the other thing, and this was Chuck's weird historical note reminded me, one of the other reasons that Smith & Wesson made sure that you could not chamber a 357 in a 38 special revolver was because at the time, there was also a cottage industry of taking old 38-200 war bring back guns and reaming them out for 38 specials because the pressure was close enough that you probably weren't going to nuke the gun. But if you put a turbo spicy 38 special plus P plus in one of those, Enfield Mark IVs that have been reamed out for 38 long Colt, the gun goes kapoof into a million pieces, a shower of sparks and tea because it's British.
I picked up about 2 months ago, I picked up a 1905 first change hand ejector in 38 special, which is kind of a rare bird, not a super rare bird, but most of those were in 38 Smith & Wesson, like the 38 short or 38 long, whatever you want to call it. And I sent a picture of that to Mark Fricky. I was like, dude, look what I just found, a 1905 first change. He goes, that's cool. Those were non-heat treated cylinders. So you have a gun that's capable of shooting something in the 38 wad cutter, like low end wad cutter, because they were made essentially to shoot like a plus P 38 Colt. right? Like just a little bit more, but not a whole lot more. I don't shoot it, but I bought it specifically for the stocks because, you know, DB has got me in this thing like buy that gun just for the grips and then sell the gun. But anyway, so I started kind of diving into the archives on this stuff. And then my dad picked up a Wolf and Clark 44 Special from like San Antonio. I'd love to get him on here because he's got some history with it.
Happily.
Where they were carrying those first change 38s. Law enforcement got in a shooting with a all steel car, lost 2 or 3 cops on a traffic stop. And the next month they're ordering Wolf and Clark 4-inch 44 specials because, hey, we're getting outgunned. But it's a really cool historical piece knowing that, you know, the original 38 special loadings were not super hot. And then as we go through time and mechanical changes of guns, all of a sudden the 38 special gets pretty freaking spicy, even at the non-plus P level. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, and when you compare a smokeless powder 38 special that's going, you know, 850 feet per second, pushing 158 grain lead round nose to like a 38 long Colt, which is going like 675, maybe 700 feet per second, pushing the same bullet weight, the 38 all of a sudden looks really hot. Sorry, I'm super ADD right now. Chuck, there was a guy in my class this last weekend shooting a 32 cal I-frame from a pocket holster. I thought you would appreciate that.
That's kick ass.
He was running
they're awesome guns.
Dude, so we did I actually stole this. So this is something that I do in this class that is, I picked up the ideas from a bunch of other people. But the drill is we do head-to-head shoot off on a piece of steel, on an AC steel. Each shooter gets a target, and it's at about 50 paces. And what I do is, because we have such a difference of guns and carry positions, I use a bunch of different start positions, right? So like I'll have like, if you're carrying like appendix or something like that, I'll have you start with everything from, you know, fence to like the cheater position. But if you've got a pocket gun, you always get to start with your fucking hand on the gun. And this last time I ran the class, the final iteration of the head-to-head shoot-off came down to the guy with a 32 cal I-frame and a dude with a fucking 22 LCR, because they were starting from the pocket and they just rip those bitches out of there and get to work faster than the only dude that was even in their ballpark was a dude who had an N-frame 357 shooting 38s with a dot in like an open
and one cutters
holster with no so
I'll tell you,
the 32 I-frame was the shit. I was dick hard for that thing.
The scariest human being, I'll tell you right now, on the planet with one of those is Mark Fricke. So when we were doing his class, I was AIing for him about 10 years ago up in Wyoming. And Mark wanted to do a walk back drill. So he had a piece of, you know, IPSC steel. You know, you're basically your C-zone steel target. So I was shooting one of the super rare, they're hard to get, the last of the real full boat Austrian Glocks. I forgot the serial number range, but they were the last of the really good ones. Yeah, the last of the really good ones where the import stuff stamped on the bottom. I mean, so I've got my pet G19, and Mark and I start the walk back. Well, we started with all the students, and then it came down to me and Mark, and we're going back and going back. So we're at 200 yards. 200 yards. And I can't drop Mark with that. He's shooting a 32 Terrier. He's literally shooting an I-frame at 38 Smith & Wesson. And
he's got to be holding. He's like,
so finally, it took me to 225 yards to drop Mark on that. And, you know, I had to be on my absolute A game, even with a G19 on a piece of IPSC steel at 225 yards. But that's what it took me to drop. You know, you got a guy like Fricky who can hit you with a gun that's that big and 32 Smith and Wesson, and he carries the thing all the time. It's kind of funny, but Mark can actually really shoot those things. And yeah, I mean, it's a level of marksmanship you don't see. But anyhow, kind of dropping into that, because it kind of feeds into this. One of the other issues that we don't see a lot talked about, and I recently kind of got this addressed with that load I did with High Desert Cartridge. So one of the 357 Magnum has really followed a lot of what we're seeing currently with 9mm. So it started off as a cartridge developed for a full-size in-frame service pistol to shoot smoking hot, very heavy defensive, or anti-personnel, anti-animal rounds. And then we started making smaller guns to take the cartridge that became very difficult and hard to shoot. And you'll note we're doing the same with 9mm, is that what 9mm started is really kind of like a Browning high power load.
Well, that's why 380's making a comeback.
Right. And then then you start getting those into like Glock 43 size guns. If there's a gun I can't shoot, it's a Glock 43. I mean, they just kind of run away. It doesn't take much to let them run away from you. Just like all the guys on the internet saying that they're shooting Full House 357 and Scandium guns. Tell me you don't really shoot by telling me that's your carry gun.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's usually a one and done for most people. So we've taken these cartridges and made smaller guns to take them. That's usually a big, giant waste of time. Kind of the classic example of that is the Smith & Wesson K-frame, the Combat Magnums, which was sort of a creation credited with Bill Jordan and his kind of fellow guys at that time that were like, well, we want a lighter, easier to carry service gun chambered for this, but we're mostly shooting 38s in them. And then you carry 357 mag as your duty gun. That's sort of like wrought with problems. I have my uncle's or great uncle, his 357 Magnum Model 19 that he carried as a police officer in the Canal Zone. He was also the range guy. And they had inmates loading 38, lead round nose for the range. The range was at the prison. And that gun has been shot so much with crappy lead 38 that it's got like this permanent, really deep ring at the end of every cylinder that you really can't get out, as I've tried. And so we have a lot of these guns sort of being shot with 38s, but then, we're trying to, and law enforcement went through a whole period with this of issuing 357 mag, but training with 38. And you get into zeroing problems, you get into recoil problems, you get a lot of issues with that. And then that went into, we'll just carry 357 mag all the time because that's the smart move, which it probably was if that's your duty gun. And they found out, you're breaking guns left and right, and you're creating flinch-o-matic shooters. We got the L frame, which didn't really work as well as everybody thought it was going to. And the only thing that I like, the only really good medium-sized frame gun that I'll really trust on a full diet of 357, real 357 forevers, is the GP100, which was literally designed around the round, almost like the original in-frames were the original guns made for 357 Magnum. The GP100 is truly the modern version of that, if that entire gun was built around the cartridge, and to take a full house loading of 357 mag. But it is really kind of a brutal cartridge to shoot if you're shooting a lot of it. And
well, Darryl, you and I kind of forged a friendship over my dinner table I have the 19-3 that launched 540 grain spears into a bad guy. And you and I were sitting there talking, and you said, the only guns I've ever seen take a steady diet of 357s were either N frames or GP 100s. And I was like, yeah. And this 19.3 had a steady diet of 38 special wad cutters and then got a duty load of 6 140 grain spears. So, and Darryl and I were kind of nerding out one night. And I said, the only guns I've seen that will take that, that abuse from a 357 Magnum are all N frames. K frames and L frames will go out of time within a couple of hundred rounds of shooting full tilt Magnums. And being a range adjunct, what you would see is the guys, they would shoot 25 rounds a year, maybe, of 357 mag, and the rest of the time they're shooting 38s. And they might even be shooting 38 plus Ps. And I can tell you 38 plus Ps now will throw a K frame and most L frames out within about 500 rounds. But you want a gun you can really run 357 Magnum without killing the shooter and killing the gun, they're all N frames. So,
or a lever gun.
The real
or
agencies,
or a lever gun,
or a lever gun, right? Yeah,
the real agencies that used a lot of both 357 Magnum practice ammo and as their duty load, you tended to find were very much N-frame agencies. So that's where you got the Model 28, the Highway Patrolman.
Yeah,
a lot of those tended to be the state trooper, traffic highway guys, because they're dealing with a lot of cars.
Yeah.
Some of them were notorious Python users, but there's another one that's hard to maintain. But truly where they came into their own was the Model 28 Highway Patrolman, which was sort of the cheaper 27.
Yeah.
And like this one, the original 357. So this is all checkered on the top. They have truly the best Smith & Wesson bluing. They're stunning guns. The Highway Patrolman had sort of a flat finish. It didn't have the checkering on top. They were really kind of made for police usage. So those 28s were real good. And it's funny. I walked into Jackson Armory one time, and they had a gorgeous 5-inch 27. And I picked the gun up. I'm looking it over. It's priced right and stuff. And then I open it up, look in the top of the frame on the inside, and I tell the general manager, I go, let me guess, this was a Dallas PD trade-in, from a Dallas PD cop. And he goes, yeah, how did you know? The flame cutting on top above the barrel was deep enough, the big fat like paper clips.
Yeah.
You could have easily dropped one of those into the groove. It had such bad flame cutting. But the gun was absolutely stunning, which is sort of like my uncle's Canal Zone gun. That gun my uncle had was carried daily on horseback in Panama. Okay, if these guys complain about abuse, I can't think of anything probably worse than a blue steel gun, and it looks brand spanking new, because a lot of those guys actually maintained their guns back in those days. They would wipe them down with a rag and oil at the end of shift and really take care of their equipment. That N frame was a perfect example. There's a gun that had a lifetime of shooting nothing but full house 357 mag, but the finish, everything, the gun was stunning. So you really had kind of a different era with this stuff, that the full house 357 is really an N frame round. And most of the other stuff is it's sort of a capability. It's one of the things I love about, for example, 327 Federal Mag. 357 Magnum is really a lot like that. And people always ask me, well, if you could only have one gun, what would it be? One handgun. And to me, it'd be a 3.5-inch 27. Because you can shoot 38 wad cutters all the way through full house 357 mag, and like this gun from the 30s, will be fully functional for its entire life. without much maintenance, and you can do everything from training. You can have a light load that is almost recoilless all the way up to killing anything that walks in North America. So, the beauty of 357 Magnum is it can be loaded from one end of the spectrum to the other, and you can really pick a load for your mission. Like I said, that one guy's registered Magnum I had, who was a bullseye shooter, a 6-inch registered Magnum with perfectly regulated sights from the factory that were made for bullseye shooting, match wad cutters, is about as recoilless as you're going to get in something like that, versus, somebody like Elmer Keith or some of these guys who are using them for hunting purposes. They want those guns that you're going to need to be able to fully penetrate a large game animal. I mean, if you look above me, trying to put one front to back through that guy is going to take some issue.
Darryl, for me, most of the cops I knew, even the guys that were still carrying wheel guns into the last 8 to 10 years, the bulk of them were shooting 38s through their K-frames. And then once or twice a year, they might have to shoot a Magnum load. Those guns were constantly on the fritz. New hand, new ejector, ratchets, whatever you want to call it. A lot of top strap cutting. The Model 66 and 65 were very popular. And talking to my old man, and this kind of came out at Revolver Roundup 21, he had the sights regulated for 357 mag. When I shoot 38s through it, it's shooting high. I go, what's the deal? And he goes, man, I regulated those sights for 357 mag, 140 grain spears. But I spent the bulk of my time shooting 38, 148 or 158 wad cutters. That gun doesn't have a whole lot of 357 mag through it, which is one of the reasons why for a nickel 19.3, it looks pretty good.
Good, yeah.
But I've had other guns that have come through the stable of pound puppies where I'm going, oh dear, that needs a new hand, a new star. Because, I fed it a steady diet of 357s. And every time I went to the range master was redoing, closing the hand window or something to keep that gun running. So the end frames, I don't see that with as much, even in the 38-200s. And I will even subscribe to your K-frame, J-frame guns. 38 plus Ps are not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
I think, my new 340 M&P is chambered in 357 Magnum, and I shoot standard velocity 38s through it, because even your 38 plus Ps will beat that gun to pieces. I started out my police career with a 340 SC on my ankle because it was lightweight. And because it said 357 on the side, the range master made me shoot 357 Magnums for a 50-round qual course. And that gun went back 3 times before I finally put 38s in it. So, as we look through history and we see why that happens, I think today most people would be fine with anything chambered in 357. Just shoot standard pressure 38s through it and you'll be fine. If you're going to shoot a real full tilt 357 or even a real hot plus P 38, shoot it in an end frame. Yep. And you're not going to beat the gun or yourself up nearly as bad.
So that being said, there is a bit of a warning just saying end frame, because there are end frames like this, the 327, super light.
Right.
That's not that happy to shoot.
No, we're talking.
That's
we're
a
talking
wad.
Yes. Yeah. Steel 6 round.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a Scandium gun, and that gun went back to Smith & Wesson 3 times. The third time they said, please quit shooting the note. I still have it in my closet. Please stop shooting 357 Magnums. And the whole reason was, yes, it will take it for 5 to 10 rounds, But please don't make it a regular firing schedule.
This 327, I specifically have, if I ever carry it, it's wad cutters in 38. Nothing more than that.
So, which also kind of gets into the changes, 357 Magnum, the round itself has changed a lot since its origin. So again, it was designed kind of as a hunting and car puncturing round. Pre-hollow points, pre all of that. That thing was designed to punch through side to side, front to front, just about everything. As we progressed, most of the round's reputation was made kind of in the 70s and crack wars at the beginning of the 80s is where their rep was truly made. And I had some unique insight into that from a couple places. So my best friend, who was like the big brother I never had, who mentored me from the time I was 18, did a lot of amazing stuff for Uncle Sam. He was one of the guys who was originally sent over, did a lot of training with Brit SAS, GSG-9, GIGN, those kind of units and stuff. And he often carried a snub 357 mag in that era. And he said the reason we liked him, and particularly the Germans went nuts for him on GSG-9. And he said GIGN, those guys were phenomenal as far as the amount of shooting they did and how good they were. But he said, when you're working an aircraft, they called them 38 Special with a flashbang, because you got to remember we didn't have low flash powders back then. And those guns with a 125 grain hollow point, and it started kind of with the super vels and stuff like that, they would throw a 20 to 25 yard ball of flame down range that was insanely impressive to watch. And then, so you had a lot of stuff like that. Another contact I had early on, I was blessed to be kind of taken in with a guy named Gene Wohlberg, who was the lab guy at San Diego PD. Gene was a firearms, propeller spinning nerd of the highest order. And him and then Dr. Fackler were sort of the big senior guys in the wound ballistic stuff back in the 80s. And some of the access we had, 357 Magnum threw all of the gel testing off. It was the one round that did not coincide well to what they were seeing in gel, because they would shoot that stuff into gel and it was extremely above average. It was not like the Hammer of Thor. It wasn't doing anything over the top spectacular. It was just simply a very good, a very above average, high end quality defensive round, but didn't coincide to what they were seeing on the street. And there was a guy who worked for California State DOJ who was one of Fackler's guys. And he had access, because of his position, and it was a gun guy, to a lot of the actual shooting reports coming in at the time. And they went out and looked at a bunch of these shootings that were stellar, spectacular, led to the reputation of those 125 grain full house 357 loads. And what I talked to him and I had been friends for years. We talked a lot as sort of the junior kids coming up in the wound ballistics world. He said every one of those shootings had a set of criteria in common. They were all shot in low lighter at night. They were all less than 6 feet. And they all involve full house 357 with a sub 4-inch, 4-inch or shorter barrel. And all of a sudden he goes, our determination was what was decking these guys like they were hit by lightning was it was actually like they were hit by lightning, as they were getting a muzzle flash in their face that was overwhelming their systems. And then once they were on the ground, they realized, oh, and I've been shot too. So there was a lot to what those things do with low flash, no flash powder versus what we see now, where they're not throwing the fireballs down range that they used to. And it's still a very good, above average, great performing round. If you use hunting loads, it's a great round to hunt with. But for people for most stuff, I don't think we need to be blowing them out at the velocities that we need to do to fully penetrate an animal with hide. So, that's why, like with Steve Shields at High Desert Cartridge Company, Steve hit me up. He does the ammo for like Fisher and Blowers and DeFore and all the kind of high-speed tactical guys. And so he goes, look, I want to do a revolver load. What are you seeing out there that you would like to see? And I go, well, we just did the wad cutter snub load for GA Georgia Precision. Let's take a look at, here's the other hole I'm seeing. We have a lot of people out there with Model 19s, Model 13, 65s, 27s, 28s, all these cool old guns that you can't replace anymore. But we're kind of ruining them because we're shooting all of these things with lead 38s, building, rings in the front of the cylinders. We're not really maximizing those guns. So I said, what I'd like to see is sort of like a 38 plus P load or a 38 load in a full house 357 Magnum case, which will lower the pressure because we're not really, it's the case is bigger. So you're not quite getting as high a pressure in the guns that is going to damage them. And we can basically load them like a 38. So I used a Model 28 4-inch as a test bed, started out running those loads with a 158 grain bullet at a full metal jacket bullet because I don't like cleaning. So I didn't want to lead the guns up real bad. And because the Co hollow point is the one we use a 158 XTP bullet. So I started out with a highway patrolman at about 1,100 to 1,000 feet per second, which really wasn't bad in a 4-inch end frame. Kept bringing that down, got down to about the 800 feet per second range, got one load lower than that, and actually the end frame didn't shoot it that well compared to the little bit higher velocity stuff, and about its happy place was about the 900 feet per second load. But I started looking at like, okay, the K-frames right at that 800 feet per second, that load is a lot of fun to shoot. I mean, you can actually take it out to the range and enjoy shooting it. And then you can pull those full metal jacket loads out, put XTPs in it, and you got a halfway decent carry load that's about 850, but the sights will regulate. They all hit to the same place. And they're actually almost usable in a J-frame should you want to do that. But the whole goal of that was to get a practical, shootable 357 Magnum to enjoy these older guns because they're fabulous guns and yet not destroy them. And, they
scar cylinders and whatnot.
And they just really seem to work better with a full house 357 Magnum casing in it. So
I have a curiosity because Chuck is kind of my ballistic nerd brother. Like there's my 340 M&P. It's chambered in 357. I'm carrying GA Arms 38 Special. Sorry, my voice is a bit non-radio right now.
Oh, no, it is very radio.
Yeah, I sound like Wolfman Jack from the Guardian Conference and working the fair and screaming at people.
Yeah, it's good radio.
Yeah, it is.
But
we all should talk like that.
Back in the day when I was carrying a Scandium 340 with a tie cylinder, and I had to shoot a 50-round qual with 357 mag, 125 grain Remington jacketed hollow points. And what finally turned the tables is somebody brought a chrono to the range. And I went, I shouldn't even be shooting 38 plus Ps out of this. I should be shooting something 38 standard pressure load out of that gun. And the range master, to his credit, goes, I don't want you to shoot wad cutters, but if those hollow point lead semi-wads, I'll authorize those because they're a duty load according to NYPD, right? But I kind of wanted to let Chuck talk about that barrel length to performance level.
That is one of my list of topics. That's a wonderful question.
And that's one of the things going to Chuck's ballistic lab. I was like, finally, somebody is putting it to action, right? But one of the things that drove us from 158 jacketed hollow points to like 158 lead semi-wads and kind of backing off the load was a guy from Blue Heron ad group brought a chronograph out to the range one day, and I went, I'm shooting really painful less than plus P 38s.
Diminishing returns, anyone?
There was a point of diminishing returns, and Chuck is way more schooled up on that than I am. So anyway.
And side note, Steve Shields is now joining us.
He sounds like a fellow propeller head.
Yes.
So yeah, throughout the history of everything we're doing, people often forget the early Super Bell, and then everybody wanted to go to plus P, things like that. Like Wayne Dobbs and I had long conversations because he was down in the Dallas area, and apparently down there, people were trying to get more stopping power, and the 38 round nose lead, even though Charles Askins probably shot more people than, any other, with a handgun, any other human being on the planet. And he thought it was a hairy chested man killer. Other people's expectations weren't, met. So they tried to improve the loads, and we came up with things like the 110 grain plus P plus treasury load in the 38 special, which was mimicked by Winchester and Remington with a 110 grain 357 Magnum running something like 1220 or 1250 out of a 4-inch gun, which a lot of people like because it was high speed and it looked really dramatic in like when pre-gel, like when you shot water or modeling clay or something like that. It was pretty dramatic. So people didn't even know what they were looking at, what good looked like. So the 357 Magnum 110 grain was something a lot of people carried because it was high speed and the bullets would basically blow up, and everybody thought that's what you wanted. And Wayne and I had a conversation where he was talking about how many failures they had because of failures to penetrate. So if we look at similar performance but less dramatic, if we go back to the FBI Miami gunfight, what was the big problem? They were pushing 115 grain Winchester silver tips at like 1,200 something feet per second. So the bullet failed to penetrate. We had about 8 inches of penetration on Michael Platt. And he went on to shoot 7 FBI agents before he was finally killed. And he was killed by an old school lead semi-wad cutter 38 special hollow point by Ed Morales that penetrated enough to get the job done. So if we look at we didn't even know what we should be we didn't even know what good was back then. Now, if we go way back, what I was talking about with Elmer Keith, what was Elmer Keith chasing? Penetration. So you got to have sufficient penetration for the target at hand. Now, Elmer was shooting very large animals. So one of the things I was going to ask Caleb, were you there when we were at Revolver Roundup and I tested the 180 grain Federal cast core? And it was only out of my 2 3/8 inch barrel GP 100.
Yeah, and we went through the block and we saw it hit the berm.
So that one, the one I'm specifically talking about, we stacked up blocks.
Okay.
And that 180 grain cast core went through 4 layers of denim, 56 inches of ballistic gelatin. And because we were losing bullets like that, Mark Freaky had a level 2 vest and a 3/4 inch plywood board. So 56 inches of gelatin struck the vest hard enough to cave the board in. So that was a 180 grain Federal cast core out of a revolver. And that's what you want if you're going to get into a fight with a bear or a moose or whatever, right? So things that 357 Magnum does real well, you tailor the ammunition for the target. And in that case, if I was in the wilderness, I might load some of those.
Yes.
Now, can I shoot a crackhead in an emergency with bear loads? Yes, I can. but how much of that penetration is wasted?
Yes.
Now, if we go back to what I was talking about, 110 grain, 125 grain, the legendary 125 grain 357 Magnum, I've seen the gel test. It's actually pretty meh, like 9 or 10 inches. At my job, we had some spectacular successes because we issued the 125 grain full house 125 grain Remington 357 Magnum, which was one of the legendary loads. Out of my security 6 4-inch, it was doing 1490 when I chronographed it. One of my sergeants got into a shooting and hit the guy right in the middle of his left shin, and it left a hole in his calf the size of a tennis ball. It just dropped the guy in his tracks. So spectacular performance. And we had another shooting where we showed our guy showed up on a domestic, and it was the classic. The husband had the wife around the neck and he had a knife and, dropped the knife and I'm going to kill her and you guys got to leave. Well, he started stabbing her and he opened up where one of the guys shot him right in the pec. And the dude paused and looked at his chest and then started stabbing her again. And it wasn't until they beamed him right in the coconut that the fight was over with. So, when it penetrated enough, it did spectacular work. And when it didn't. Just like that 115 grain Winchester Silvertip in the FBI Miami fight, insufficient penetration. So the big boogeyman back then was over penetration. Oh my God, if the bullet exits, yada, yada, yada. Well, if you have a bullet that performs, it mushrooms, things like that. Like one of my measures of what good is, because I've seen a lot of shootings with it, is 124 grain plus P 9mm gold dot. So back then, originally it was over 1,200 feet per second, 124 grain bullet. And I look at the level of penetration we were getting, and it would go all the way through a grown man, typically pop out the other side. And people were like, oh my God, my over penetration. Well, we'd find the bullet laying 10 feet behind the bad guy.
Yep.
Like,
or caught in clothes.
Caught in the clothes, whatever. But think about, you can toss a bullet 10 feet. So what kind of exit velocity did it have? It wasn't a big deal. If I'd have known then what I know now with my 357 Magnums, I might have just carried 158 grain lead semi-walking or hollow points. But I definitely wouldn't have carried the 125 grain Magnums that we were issuing, which, by the way, to mirror what Bryan was talking about, we were issuing, when I hired on the job, holsters were made out of actual dead cow, and they had a dude's name on it, like Bill Jordan or Don Hume. And then revolvers back in my area, men shot Magnums, and that's the way it was. And we issued 125 grain Magnums, but my job issued Model 66 Smith & Wessons, and those guns fell apart all the time. Our range master was constantly fixing them. I carried a Ruger Security 6, which I wish Ruger still made, because I think it was the perfect combination of K-frame-ish while being tough enough. I've probably got more than 10,000 rounds through mine, because we authorized personal duty guns back then. Probably got over 10,000 rounds through my gun, and it's fine.
I would just like to interject. This is the reason I'm friends with Chuck Haggard, because when I call him and go, hey, bro, I just picked up this new gun. Here's the barrel length. He spouts off this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And tailors my carry ammo.
Yes.
That's all I got.
We had Chuck out to Taurus HQ to teach our sales reps like how to not be retarded with a revolver. And I got a text from one of the guys that works in my marketing department, and his exact words were, yo, that N-word Chuck knows a lot of shit about some shit.
Yeah, let me, because I'm sure Steve will be able to add some real technical expertise to this. So I just went and grabbed this. This is my current kind of car gun, general purpose revolver. I carry a lot right now, thanks kind of to Steve's load. So Rob Leahy did a pocket holster, which is really just a driving under my leg holster. That was a thing from where I worked as a cop. Metropolitan areas, you drive with a gun under your leg, which if you're going to do that, a double action revolver is a smart ticket to do that with. It's got my police ID on it, so if I get pulled over, I just slide it over and we solve a lot of problems. The load I pulled out of this is Steve's XTP load on that 357 that's running, what, Steve, about 850, 9-ish?
Yeah, 9, just a little bit over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this gun is at one time was a Model 19 service gun that, so it's a square butt, and then Finks put in a 2.5-inch barrel, parked it, gold bead front sight, real utilitarian. You'll notice it just looks like a 3.5-inch end frame that's been put in the dryer too long, which is why I like it, how it feels and balances. But again, I train with this now, shooting exclusively the high desert 357 Magnum load in it with the 158 total metal jacket. And then I leave the range and I just throw the XTP load in it. And I found it shoots almost to the exact same place as the training load. So again, this lets me take an old utility revolver. This one, because of its background, is not worth the kind of money a lot of them are, but I get to enjoy literally daily use of a classic 2.5-inch Model 19, which was literally, this was like the ultimate undercover detective dope guys. This was the Glock 19 of its era. It was the kind of compact duty gun that all the cool undercover guys carried, and they're great guns. But with that load, I get maximum fill on the cylinder, but it doesn't beat the tar out of me to shoot it or beat the tar out of the gun. So I'll turn that over to Steve to maybe expound on that a little about kind of proper selection of a training load.
Well, Matt caught me off guard. I was actually just getting done loading a bunch of 38 special all day long. Yeah. Started my career with the Park Service, actually with Model 10s. You know, back then in the 80s, we were packing those 38 special with round nose lead. You know, I think the Park Service was still living back in the 50s or the 40s or something. But I got to the sheriff's office. We were running 686s, and I had 2 shootings with that. We were running 158 grain Remingtons, semi-jacketed hollow points. But I ran a couple of L-frame 686s in the ground because at that time when I came on the sheriff's office, that'd been late 80s. The firearms guy, we had full house loads for everything, training, everything. He just bought full house loads. And we had 50 to 100 rounds per person, you know, per month. They'd give us out. No one would ever shoot them. So, of course, I'd grab all of them. And I just shoot the snot out of everything. And didn't take long to run an L-frame into the ground. But trying to develop a load that you can run in an L or K frame and not beat the snot out of it, especially working with Darryl here. You know, I mean, I've got some older Smiths, you know, from the 60s and 70s. He's got older stuff than I've got. I'm sure a lot of people out there got a lot of old stuff. But it is possible to develop a load that will reliably penetrate. I mean, not the heavy duty stuff, you know, you're not going to go through car doors or blah, blah, but my stuff goes through windshield glass and still expands. I tested it on several vehicles out here on my range. You can get it to expand and not have to have, you know, 12 to 1400, you know, feet a second, and, you know, be abusive on the gun and the shooter at the same time.
And, you know, the big thing is just getting them, like Chuck was saying, they just got to go deep. I always look at, you know, I came from an agency that we used 45 Colts. The reality is, looking back now with a lot of wisdom, if you're not depending on expansion for everything, it really comes down to penetration. And that's something I've learned with talking to the hunting guys. And, well, hunting guys, you know, my wife, who's got dead animals all over the house, is the reality is penetration is what puts deer-sized animals down, or actually all of them. It's really, you don't hear the hunting guys talking about, well, it expanded or the bullet blew up, or they don't want that. They want it to go through and through. And it really comes down as soon as you start playing the shot placement game, rather than depending on magic bullets and the blue pill and the, all of this BS. If you just sit there and go, can I get it into a heart, lung, or can I get it into a brain? And then expansion is just an added, bonus. It changes your thought on a lot of these rounds. And they just need to get deep enough to get into those critical organs. And you have to have the ability to hit those critical organs. It's going to be tough to put that kind of accuracy down. Everybody's big on like, oh, B8 suck. Okay, whatever. The B8 exactly replicates what you need to hit on a human, whether it's center chest or in the head. Exact replication of the accuracy standard I need to deck humans. And then it comes down to, do I have a round that can get into those things, shot from about any angle or realistically through whatever barriers, like Steve was talking about, more looking at, can it get through a windshield than can you get through a door? I've always found car doors to be one of those roll the dice with, depending on what it hits in there. But if you're really trying to stop the driver, you need to be shooting through glass at where the critical parts of the driver are. So one of the things I do like about this XTP, we'll test it at Revolver Roundup, but that 158 XTP is known to be like a late expander. So I want all that penetration first, and then if I get some expansion at the end, terrific, which is much better than a lot of these rounds that expand way too much early and then don't get to where they need to be to put a human, to deck a human. It's hard to, people don't relate to it, but I sit there and go, the ethical shooting of humans is what the goal is, just like what we do when we're hunting in the hunting world is why would you shoot to maim and harm and injure and create a lot of pain in a human that we won't do to a deer? The whole goal is to ethically put down what we're shooting at with a minimal amount of force possible and the minimal amount of rounds possible. So if we start selecting bullets like we are trying to ethically shoot humans, it changes the dynamic a bit. And I'm always looking now for penetration versus expansion as penetration and placement versus expansion and combat accuracy, if you can hit them anywhere and it's okay. I mean, I got several deer or cow skulls, like longhorns and stuff like that for home decoration. And it's weird because all of them have a 22 Magnum hole in the skull.
What's funny?
Well,
it's kind of a weird thing.
I got a blaze.
You suck.
Great chat. Darryl, Chuck, Caleb, Steve, don't know you.
You should though.
You'll meet him. You will. He'll be a Revolver Roundup.
All right.
But I do want to plug Revolver Roundup is coming up. Me and Caleb will be at the kids' table. Chuck will be there doing Chuck stuff. Darryl will be there doing DB stuff.
I'll be there.
Steve will be there. Steve will be there.
Coming. Great, man.
And we're getting close to being sold out, which I never thought we would see. But yeah, we're getting close to hitting 100 participants.
Right on.
So
and I wanted to throw Chuck a shout out because I perpetrated upon him. I said, hey, we're going to do Rule 1 guns at Guardian. And we did 45 minutes of tactical improv shoved into 2 hours. And it went great. P.S. I got the marks back today. We got a really high rating in our class. So
surprise.
Yeah. So thanks for that. Had a great dinner afterwards that DB was a part of. Anyway, I got a blaze. I got stuff to do tomorrow with the belt company. So
Wait,
I got to
you
get
have a
up
belt
little
company?
early.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
hey
he's got
guys.
belts.
EDC Belt Co. They make the finest belts for concealed carry. I know. I've only fucking worn an EDC Belt Co. belt since before SHOT Show of this year. In fact, I took my belt off in front of Bryan on the SHOT Show floor to put
At
on the
SHOT.
belt that I am wearing right now. I'm a better salesman for this shit than you are. Get an EDC Belt Co.
You
belt.
are.
They fuck super hard. They're awesome.
But
What?
but anyway, my brother and our lost brother here, the Jack Muslim Hanny. I've been promising him a front porch decompression session for 2 weeks. So I got a blaze, but you
Well,
guys
he's-
have a good one.
He's also due to be on one of these also.
He should be. I think so. He is the only guy I know that carries a 296 in an appendix rig every single day. And I'll throw this Hanny story quickly. I helped him with a like a Rule 1 guns type class at TACCon a couple years ago. And he hands me a timer and he goes, bro, I'm going to start talking. Sometime in the next 15 minutes, hit the timer. And he's got his hand in his pocket and he's talking about, 38s and snubs and all this. And just randomly, I hit the timer and he whacks this target in front of about 8 people right in the melon dome. And then everybody kind of stops and he goes, okay, that's why I carry a pocket gun. And I'm like, oh my God, like I just randomly hit it just 2 minutes into the stuff. So anyway, but yeah, we need to get Hanny on for a podcast, and Chuck, Caleb, and Darryl, of course, you guys are my brothers. Steve, I'll see you at the Revolver Roundup. And Matt, thanks always. And I'll
Always
talk
a
to you
pleasure.
guys soon.
All right.
So we had talked about the snubs, and we had, like Bryan was talking about what he carried, and so the thought occurred to me. I wanted to throw something out: is bullets have a design envelope. What we were talking about with the load that Darryl was talking about, that High Desert developed for him, which is basically designed, like if you're going to use that XTP, it's designed above the minimum design velocity, where that XTP, which is actually, they're pretty forgiving bullet in the 357 and the 9 millimeters in my experience, but it's above that design velocity. So the bullet opens up and it works great. What Bryan was talking about, like my old job's 125 grain 357 Magnum. It was $14.90 out of my 4-inch Ruger. If I was to launch it, which would be dumb as hell, but like out of a 1 7/8 inch Scandium, probably doing, breaking 1,000 feet per second, 1,100 feet per second, would probably actually have better performance because the bullet slowed down, and it would, instead of fragmenting when it hit, it would mushroom and penetrate. Now, I have chronographed that exact same ammo out of a 16-inch Marlin carbine. A buddy of mine had a 357 carbine, and it was doing over 2,200 feet per second, which it's going to explode the first thing it hits, probably get a few inches of penetration on a human target. But if what he was using it for was shooting coyotes, like when they're getting the chicken coops and things like that. So perfect.
Which, to be fair, you don't really need penetration for
it would blow a hole in a coyote the size of a tennis ball all the way through, but you had a very light target. So what this teaches us is the bullet, the velocity, the design performance of the bullet, what weapon or what firearm we launch it out of. Does it gain or lose velocity out of the barrel length that you're choosing? All of this goes together. And some of this, getting outside the scope of what we're talking about, like, I don't know if you remember Matt, because I know you were deep into it because you're friends with the other Chuck, but the whole Roland Special gun, a lot of people built Roland Specials. A lot of people built Roland Specials, which was a comped gun and it had an optic on it. So let's put weight on the slide, and then we have a comp that robs recoil.
Yeah.
And then we're going to complain
And use weak ammo.
the gun doesn't function with 115 grain Winchester white box because the competition guys knew in the 70s and 80s that the comps reduced recoil, so you had to hot rod the gun. The whole reason why IPSC went from 45s to 38 supers was to get more pressure, more gas.
That's literally why Superface exists, right? Like that's a term that's such a throwback. I'm not actually old enough to have heard it, and I'm I'm old enough now that I feel very old all the time. But yeah, no, the gas pressure issue was a real thing.
But so my point is, to a lot of people, like the IPSC guys knew this. And then Darryl and I have talked about, because we're all old enough to be tactical historians now. I'll talk to guys that are doing entries and they're like, hey, we're going to try this tactic. And I'm like, dude, we tried that in 1988 and that shit didn't work. Human beings are human beings. Biology of animals and humans hasn't changed in more than 10,000, 12,000, whatever. I forget when Cro-Magnon showed up, but it was a while ago. And if you put projectiles into humans, biology is still a thing. It doesn't change. We haven't changed that much.
That's the thing. Like with bullet envelopes and penetration, right? Really good example of that not too long ago from my job. My boss went to Africa, shot a Cape Buffalo with a 460 Magnum with a handgun, killed it, shot it at damn near contact distance, and described it as one of the most terrifying experiences of his life. If you have a chance, the podcast we have a whole podcast about it, Taurus by the Horns. But what was interesting to me, because I'm a fucking bullet dork like almost everybody else on this, is the rounds that he was selecting. And he had been coached on these rounds by somebody whose last name is Hornady. So I feel like that guy probably knows a little bit about projectile selection and killing things in Africa. And every single round in that gun was a hard cast penetrator, because what he needed it to do was he needed to go through this buffalo long ways if necessary, and to shatter every bone that it hit on the way as it was going through there. So when we're having these conversations about expansion and all of that stuff, and what Darryl said earlier reminds me of when people are asking me, how do I pick a round for my revolver for self-defense? I say, here are the two criteria. It has to hit where the sights on your gun are, because your gun probably has fixed sights that you can't adjust. If it has adjustable sights, great. We can delete that criteria. Fucking fantastic. Do whatever you want. But it has to hit to the sights and it has to penetrate. Anything else after that is icing on the cake. And I'm happy if it does it. Like the new Federal Punch hits to the sights on some of my guns, penetrates, and it expands. Great. I'm so glad it expands. I don't care that it expands, but it does, which is a bonus. So it's interesting that Darryl's described me as the guy who figured all of this stuff out on my own, even though it had already been figured out, which, again, because the guys who had already figured it out were dead or didn't make YouTube videos. It's like we had already figured all of this shit out back in the 60s and 70s, that you needed bullets that penetrated and hit to where your fucking gun was pointed. And then we had to go through all of this bull crap of, well, let's do, super light, ashtrays going mock Jesus and all of this other stuff to get back to where we are, where your most common duty rounds are, 124 grain 9 or 147 grain 9s that penetrate and hit to where the gun's pointing. And I'm like, did we just do the same thing that we had figured out 50 years ago, 60 years ago now?
Even better than that, Caleb, is like somebody in the comments pointed out we need to go back to hot lottles, because nobody complained about penetration, nobody complained about stopping power. The Civil War or the Revolutionary War, nobody complained about stopping power, right?
Yeah, because if you shoot somebody with a 75 caliber round ball,
we were throwing musket balls at each other. But think about what did we do? We got to, like, the Brits found out when they had the 303, the full metal jacket rifles, they were just ice picking people with these things. And it wasn't working as great as they wanted it to, because there was, the bullets were too stable and very, very round and that sort of thing. So we worked on expanding ammunition and things like that. We have spent 100 years from like 1865 to like the 1960s when Superville showed up.
Oh my God. I remember when you said this to me at the Revolver Roundup, and it fucking blew my mind then, and it's dreaming into me now.
We jacketed the bullets. We made the bullets more aerodynamic. We wanted more range, more velocity. But then if you look at how we engineered bullets, what did we do? We want a modern rocket bullet that hits the target and then magically turns into a musket ball.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
it.
That's a scientific thing on its own. I mean, if you get too much velocity on a hollow point, they're going to open up too quick and act like a parachute. You won't get your penetration. If you go them too slow, they won't open up. They'll act like a full metal jacket. So you got to get that sweet spot, and every bullet has been engineered for that sweet spot to be. But also, talking in the industry, they also make them to the lowest common denominator hand loader, meaning they might say, okay, it expands. You have to, if you're going to hand load X bullet, ours has to be hand loaded between 1,000 to 1,200. When actually you can get them things down to closer to 900, and they'll expand every time. But if one doesn't, someone's going to complain about it. They're going to bitch and moan, and whatever. All your stuff is your product's garbage or whatever. It's like, well, what are too many variables here? That's not telling me what you're shooting it out of. I made a load of 77 grain that Kyle DeFore's using, and a bunch of these other guys are using for long range 223. And I had Jared Reston get a hold of me. He says, "Hey, I hear you got this 77 grain." I said, "Okay." So I sent him some. So he calls me back, says, "Man, I'm having to dope my scope. The thing is like shooting like, I don't know what he said, like 3 feet low or something. I don't know what he said, 16 inches, 20 inches low." I said, "Man, I've been making this load for 10 years now. Whoa, I don't, man, what are you shooting it out of?" He goes, "Oh, my 11.5 suppressed." I thought, well, shit, man.
Well, yeah, it's going to be completely different.
I've never tested out of 11.5 suppressed. It's all, it's long range. The lowest shortest barrel I ever used it out was a 16 inch. I was like, you're killing me here, Smalls.
That's right.
Be out here.
Yeah.
I just thought it was.
But yeah, there's that sweet spot that every company has for their bullet for hand loaders, but they make them to this lowest common denominator person of what they're going to shoot them out of.
When there's two interesting things on that, like I want to elucidate. So for people who don't understand what Chuck's talking about with the whole musket ball pistol bullet analogy, the Charlottesville musket that was the standard, it was the first standard U.S. service long gun, right? That fired a .69 caliber round ball, which works out to actually probably closer to .65. What's the what's the ideal expansion for your 9s, your 40s, and your 45s? Over 0.6 inches is what we're looking for ideal expansion from like an HST or a Gold Dot or something like that. So when Chuck says that we spent 200 years of gun development to get back to musket balls fired out of pistols, he's not kidding. It is almost exactly dimensionally similar to a musket ball. It's heavier, which actually makes it probably more effective in the long term, but it's literally like a 0.65 round ball versus a pistol bullet that expands to 0.62, 0.63, 0.65. The other thing with the hand loading, that was like a light bulb going off in my brain of that's why Federal doesn't sell HST bullets. That's why Federal doesn't just sell the HST projectile, because it's designed to work in a narrow band of velocities. And if they sell it to Bobby Reloader is not going to reload it right. And he's going to have it at too fast or too slow. And then you're going to end up with, Joe Sixpack complaining, "Oh, these HSTs are trash," when obviously we know HSTs are definitely not trash.
Let me add something to that real quick. Is the bullet configuration on that penetration is also an issue. So for those of us who have spent time on human autopsies, and I imagine it's very similar for the guys doing the hunting side of stuff with the animals, is we had a trend at the agency I worked for. At one point, everybody wanted to carry full metal jacket, round nose in their 45s to shoot through cars. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but it was an option. So we had a couple incidents, and one shooting in particular I was at the autopsy for that was a kind of the golden indicator is, guy eats a full load of a SIG 220 through the goodles. That's a Wayne Dobbs term. That's all that intestinal stuff down here, the goodles. It's a Texas thing, I guess. And you go to the autopsy, and there was an entry hole and an exit hole, and literally no damage inside the body because those round nose full metal jacket just pushed everything out of the way. All that intestinal tract that should have been tore up wasn't. Now, the guy ended up getting killed with a 147 grain 9mm coming in the back, expanding enough, deep enough penetration that it nicked the guy's heart going through, and that's what ended up killing him, and actually dropping him at the thing. So a lot of these rounds, as long as the front of them is fairly flat, is really what we're looking for, is that it'll bite and tear. A lot of the hollow points, we're looking for them to expand to tear things going through and to make things that hydraulically bleed. What I've also found is for stuff like wad cutters and some of these rounds, they tend to bite hard on stuff that's round, like skulls, faces, things like that are oftentimes deflecting rounder bullets, is getting stuff that'll bite, or windshields, for example, stuff like that you need stuff with sort of a flatter face or a cutting surface, and then it just needs to cut deep, if that makes sense. So a lot of times we're sort of looking at stuff a little bit wrong. One of the rounds I point to that, everybody makes fun of, but have stacked bodies for 100 years, 32 ACP. If you look at the guns originally chambered for it, it was literally, the gun was designed around the cartridge, sort of like 45 ACP. In the Colt 1903s, those little guns. If you shoot them, you literally pick them up and they almost aim themselves because of the grip angle. Very low or little recoil, so normal people can shoot them without getting flinchy. And even with pathetic sights, they about aim themselves. And what we found over history, those were police guns in Europe and military guns for ages.
Okay, but
and even without
don't know anything about policing, so like,
right? But I mean,
it was still a point in their favor.
It was still a service round, but if you could hit things center chest and get deep enough penetration, you know what? They worked. And a lot of this stuff comes right back to that on a human-sized, light human-sized animal. A 32 will work. The beauty of like what we're seeing with the punch rounds and some of the 22 rounds is the problem has always been with 22. It's been penetration. That's always been the issue, is that they just are not, particularly you'll buy them in a pail with round nose lead, pathetic ammunition. They just don't penetrate. Now we get punch and velocitors that'll actually penetrate sternums and skulls. That's a whole new world. Like I said, I've got a bunch of cow skulls that were all shot with 22 mag.
Do you think that the penetration issue is why you have like I was working on an article for this years ago, well, not that many years ago, but it was about 20 fatal 22 LR shootings. And as I was digging through the reports that I could find, whenever I could, I would toss out ones that couldn't determine a weapon type, and I would keep the ones that had like rifle or handgun, right? And there were way more fatal 22 LR rifle shootings than there were handgun shootings. I found a lot of 22 LR handgun shootings that would have been fatal with that would have been fatal with a rifle, where it was like subject was shot in the, you know, chest with 22 revolver and lived, versus subject was shot in the chest with a Ruger 10/22 and died on the spot. And I wonder if that additional velocity that you're getting out of the rifle is the difference maker in that sort of that fatality rate with, you know, junky 22 ammo, right?
Chuck and I have the same answer to this. Is the 22 rifle shootings we've all been to are fatalities, and it's a couple of things. They've got the penetration they generally need to get through bone, and they tend to be really accurate.
Right, when deployed, you're shooting a recoilless gun,
and most of these are like 8 feet, you know, where they're mounting the gun on 3 points of contact that doesn't recoil, and you know they tend to hit what they're aiming at, and it just tends to work. Now, if you look, Greg Ellifritz did some stuff with the minor caliber stuff, and here's what he was finding. And I think any of us with kind of police backgrounds is citizen shootings with a lot of those. What is, and this is part of what we're teaching on a lot of this Rule 1 and small gun stuff. The goal for a citizen shooting, defending themselves, it just needs the problem to stop and go away.
Yep.
You don't need to take it into custody. You don't need to put handcuffs on it. And generally, the prey or the crook is in a different mode, in that if a citizen shoots them with whatever it is, if they can get away, they can criminal another day. They know if they get shot by the cops, they've really got to kind of fight or flight it, because they're done for if they get captured or whatever. So it's a different level of motivation. So a lot of these smaller calibers in the past have been very successful with citizens shooting crooks. It doesn't have to necessarily kill them on the spot. It just needs to make them leave, is a success. Now, we would often get them in an ER or wherever, either dead somewhere else, or that they get rolled out of a car in front of the ER and the car drives off. Is they're certainly effective, is that it stopped the problem. So, you know, again, this is a lot like, it really is a lot like hunting, is stuff that penetrates in the right place to get to critical organs, puts the game or the opponent down, and things to areas outside of that wound, and you end up either with a lost animal, a missed animal, or in the case of crooks, is they're fully capable still of being a problem. Now, whether they run off or not is, you know, a coin toss. But, you know, like I said, after doing this for, you know, pushing, you know, or 3.5 decades now, at a professional level, I've just come to the conclusion I need it to go deep and I need it to bite. And like you said, hit to the sights. And, you know, the beauty of a lot of stuff I'm shooting, like my 19 or these 3.5-inch end frames or my highway patrolman, they all get adjustable sights. So I dial them for the load. On all my snubs and stuff, I want them to, you know, with the fixed sight guns, I need them to hit dead to the sights, and I need a round that bites and penetrates. And that's where the wad cutters have come in. And, you know, we'll see how some of that load development goes. But it's, I think we have made way too much out of magic bullets and magic velocity, when we should have been making a lot of stuff out of properly constructed bullets at manageable velocities, and selecting bullets that work in that manageable velocity range to fit the gun we're shooting. Yeah. Again, the round I need to work in an airlight J frame is a completely different round that I need that I can shoot comfortably and effectively in an end frame. Yeah, that's going to be two different things. And, you know, particularly like I said, with my arthritis issues, trying to preserve these guns. Now shooting in-frame guns that shoot like a 22, they actually shoot more like a 32 long. They shoot so light that you can actually be incredibly effective with them, whether it's in follow-up shots, you're not inducing a flinch factor, you're not inducing a lot of things by better matching the load, bullet, velocity, and shape to what the goal is, rather than what some magazine or internet celebrity or somebody on a forum or a bubblegum forums or fanboy forums. Like I said, I wish I had a nickel for every guy on some of these fanboy forums. Oh, I always shoot full house 357 Magnum or snub 44 mags, and all. It's all BS. It's all from people who don't actually shoot. Now, do I know some people who can do that? Absolutely. I had a buddy who was real well-known in the Marine Special Operations community, sniper community, all that, became a cop. And I show up at the range one day and he's got a 2.25 inch 640 and an appendix rig. And I'm all, dude, seriously? Got big gunfighter dude, that? He goes, yeah, that's what I carry. And he goes, and I run, 357 Magnum in it. And I'm sitting here, and then I watch him. He goes, okay, here. And he goes out and, tags like an 8-inch plate at 50 yards and 5 shots, like no big deal. And I went, well, I guess I'm just going to sit here and shut up, because you're one of the few guys out there who can actually do this. But again, what he did is dedicated himself to a system. He was a little ahead of his time for his age. Is that, look, I just want to be armed all the time and wear like normal people clothes and not care, and shoving a 2.25 inch 640 down the front of his pants with an effective 357 Magnum load that he can hit you in the chest at 50 yards with. You know what? Money.
Yeah.
Just
That'll
money.
solve most problems. I got to dip out, guys. So product. It's 11 o'clock.
So
I'm
on Graves. I just woke up a couple hours ago.
That's your problem,
and
not my problem.
I'm already drinking Monster.
Oh God, your RIP, your blood pressure.
Before you go, I have a question for you concerning Taurus. The episode is specifically about 357. A bunch of us have had very good luck with Taurus revolvers. All the new stuff has been, I think I have 5 of them, which multiple I have purchased myself. They've been good. I've enjoyed them thoroughly. Which of the ones are 357?
We have a whole whack of 357 revolvers. So in the small frame lineup, we have the 605, which is going to be your kind of J-frame-ish analog. We have a 605 Toro, which is the Taurus Optics Ready option. It's the first ever small frame defensive revolver, comes factory ready for red dots. Kind of a cool idea. I have strong feelings about it. I think it's great. This one's the 856, which is a 38 special. But we have that as a 605, which is a 5-shot 357 Magnum. Then moving into medium frames, we have the 65, which is basically an L frame size, but takes K frame loaders, fixed sights, very meat and potatoes. Then we have the 66, which is a 7-shot, 4-inch or 6-inch, same loaders that you would use on a 686 plus. Those loaders will also work on the Tracker, which is a 7-shot 357 Magnum, which is comes in 4 or 6-inch. The difference between the Tracker and the 66 is the Tracker's ported and has what consumers think is a nicer grip, but I actually much prefer the grip shape on the 66 because it has this little nub right here at the top, which is almost like a little wee beaver tail. And since I hold the gun wrong, it really helps me get my grip put together on the gun. So Tracker, we have the 608, which is an 8-shot 357 Magnum. That one is available in 4 or 6-inch barrels. It's also ported. Keep an eye out for a cool 608 version that I had nothing to do with the development of whatsoever in maybe the next year or so.
Mention the Rossies.
Oh yeah.
No, believe me, I'm getting to the Rossies. I still got Taurus guns to get through.
Yeah.
So with the 608, Darryl, this isn't the 608 that we talked about. This is the Caleb Giddings 608. So this one has almost nothing to do with carrying a gun for shooting people in the face, but almost nothing, unless you like 5-inch end frames, hypothetically, because that's about what it's going to be. Hypothetically. So then we have on the full size, like Magnum, like these are our bigger than end frame, kind of in between an end frame and an X frame. You've got the Raging Hunter series. So we have 357s in the Raging Hunter series. There's 7 shots. You can load those things with like wherever the Ruger pressure 357 Magnum loads and the hand loading goes. You can put those in a Raging Hunter and they'll be fine. Don't do what some guy did on the internet recently and try to shoot 7 squibs out of his gun. Because Lord, the number of people who tagged me in pictures of this gun where it's got a little bullet sticking out of the barrel and the whole thing is cracked.
Clearly it's the manufacturer's fault.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's clearly my fault. I made a shitty gun. So that's the Raging Hunter. Those are 357s. And then we have the poly protectors, which I don't have an opinion on the poly protector specifically because I haven't shot it. Like I haven't shot them at demos or anything like that. We introduced them years and years ago. It's the 605 poly. It was kind of Taurus's answer to the LCR. I don't have an opinion on it because I haven't shot it. And I really, really try hard, despite the fact that I work for the company, to not have uninformed opinions about products that I don't fucking know anything about. Which brings me to the Rossi revolvers, which I know a lot about because they're really cool. So we brought Rossi's revolvers back in 2023. We brought a 3-inch round butt. That's the RP63. And then a 6-inch square butt and a 4-inch square butt. That's the RM66 and the RM64. They are bigger than they are about Colt D-frame sized, actually. Again, they take K-frame loaders. They don't 1-to-1 fit K-frame holsters because they're a little bit smaller dimensionally than K-frames, but they have really, really good DA actions in them. Just out of the box, the DA actions on all of them are really solid across the board. And if I were to put them in perspective for people who are familiar with our product lines, so if you have like your basic, I have a basic 856, it's almost out of reach. So I feel like your basic level Taurus revolvers like this 82, then you would have the executive grade being the top shelf of things that come out of Brazil. The Rossi is going to be in between the two of them, right? Yeah. So you're going to get some of the quality touches, some of the quality features that you look for on the executive grade, but not everything, and it's not going to be the same price. Like the 3-inch gun is like $400, which is it's like, yeah, buy that instead of an SP101. Not that there's anything wrong with the SP101, but the Rossi does hold one more bullet. So, of 357 Magnum at that, if you're into that sort of thing, I have shot 357s out of every single one of the guns in those lines. And I'll do I had to do 200 rounds of 357 out of the 3-inch gun for proof testing for an article, and I was just like, I'm good. I don't want to do that anymore. But yeah. So for people who don't know, I work for Taurus USA. It has been a fascinating year and change that I've been there so far. We are doing some really fun stuff. We have some really cool products coming out. If you want more information on our stuff, go to taurususa.com. If you want to learn more about me, just do a Google search for Caleb Giddings. I'm all over the internet. I did just
he is nicer in person than he is in the internet.
Darryl, I'm really nice on the internet these days. I'm way nicer than I used to be.
You used to be a jerk, so yeah, you made some improvement.
I used to be a real jerk. I did just do a video. It's on my YouTube channel, Mr. Revolver. We were talking about unconventional revolver reloads, and I wanted to kind of dive into the idea of not just what's the quickest way to get 6 back into the gun, but just to get 2 back into the gun and get the gun back up on target and get rounds out on target. I had some results that they wouldn't be surprising to anybody here that's talking on this screen right now, but they might be surprising to some people out there. So Mr. Revolver on YouTube, and that's it. Matt, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, wait. Hey, Caleb, that isn't it. What is the first thing you're doing when you get off of here?
Going to the bathroom.
Dolan and Bolke's.
Yeah. I already did that. What do you think?
Okay.
Like, if you've been watching the live feed and I'm like constantly doing this, I'm like,
I just want to make sure you have I want to make sure your priorities are straight.
That's so the first thing I do when I get off of here is I'm going to lock in your order for your 2 ultralights. Then I'm going to tell people before I get off here, sign up for the Revolver Roundup at Gunsight in November. There's literally like 5 seats left. So, get your butts in there before it goes away. This is something everybody knows. I'm a fundamentally unserious person. I don't like to make jokes, but this is something I'm serious about. One of the reasons why I am so passionate about the revolver thing is my dad carried a revolver when he was an LA sheriff's deputy. And as I grew up and as I matured, I realized that he had so much knowledge about this esoteric platform that was dying. It was every time a copper who carried one of these guns in the line of duty went away, knowledge died with them. And part of the reason why I do this and why I am I'm in my 40s and I'm the young revolver guy. But part of the reason why I do this is to preserve this knowledge. And I am very passionate about this because I don't think that having this knowledge is a bad thing, because I can close my eyes and not stretch my imagination and see a future where revolvers are a primary carry gun for a lot of people because the laws have gotten completely out of control. So preserving this knowledge is super important to me. And if you are not signed up for the Revolver Roundup, you are missing out on a chance to go download knowledge directly into your brain from people who have done it for real, who have carried these guns in the line of duty, who have carried these guns in harm's way, or in my case, who really, really liked them and like figured a bunch of shit out, but love this platform and care about it. And if you want this knowledge to stay alive, and if you don't want in 40 years to be trying to figure out how to fucking reload one of these guns because everybody's dead and they don't make, brainwave videos, come to a Revolver Roundup. It's a wonderful experience. I love teaching it. It is without a doubt the highlight of my year. So, and Darryl, I'm a medium for my shirt. So I'll text you that later.
All right.
All right, guys.
Have a good night. You handle my 22 mag. I'll handle your instructor shirt.
Lovely. What a deal. All right. See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Now, Chuck, you have a specific topic that you want to talk about that we can't forget, and it's modern usage of that 357 Magnum.
Yeah, so 357 is one of the things when I'm talking in revolvers, I talk to people all the time and they're like, well, I'm not into them. It's not my thing. I don't want to own them. So I actually have a whole spiel on why, like if you're a firearms instructor, why you should own a double action revolver. And it's specifically as a marksmanship training tool for people who are having trouble with trigger, grip, flinch, things like that. Because there are things you can do with a revolver that you cannot do with any other firearm, as far as like things like skip loading and things like that, where you are setting up specific drills that cure people. Like I've used double action revolvers to cure people of afflictions like pinning the trigger, flinching, things like that. Two of the most useful guns you can own in your life are going to be a good 22 revolver and a good 357 Magnum revolver. And I was reminded of that when I was down at Taurus doing the class that Caleb was talking about. I did 3 days with all their sales staff, and they had a wide variety of experience, and a lot of them confided to me they were at the class so they can learn more about the revolvers, because you don't want to look like a goober when you're selling product, or if you have to do a demo, things like that. But, hey, I carry a whatever, compact 9mm. I forget, what model. And since they're Taurus people, like maybe a G3 or GX4, I don't have all their stuff memorized. So one of the guys hit me up and he goes, "Hey, I do a lot of backpacking and I'm worried about, I got my family, I got my kids, and we go into places where there's bears and things like that." And he goes, "I got my little 9mm, but what do you think?" And we had all the Taurus and the Rossi revolvers there. And one of them was at 3-inch, one of them was at 4-inch Rossi. But I'll use that as an example of a 2.5 to 4-inch Smith & Wesson K frame, or a GP100 Ruger, or a SP101 Ruger. We're just going to talk about a small to medium frame 357 Magnum revolver. What can I do with that? So things that I've used revolvers for. What you can do with a revolver you can't do with a semi-auto is have the gun run reliably, accurately, and function 100% reliably that with any ammo you put in it. So I've used revolvers. Yeah. I once shot a copperhead in my backyard with 38 shot shells, which I was able to launch that round and kill a copperhead without it. This was in the city, so I have no ricochet potential, no danger to my neighbors, right? So I can utilize snake shot, rat shot on small varmints. I can load wad cutters and I can have a really nice day at the range. I can shoot targets. They're also super, super accurate. They're effective as a defense load at the type of ranges where we use handguns for defense. And then I have also used wad cutters for small game hunting. Like literally I've hunted rabbits and squirrels with a 38 revolver with wad cutters. I can bump it up if I got a bigger, I'm a big fan of wad cutters for defensive use, but if I have a medium-sized or small frame gun, like 3 or 4 inches, then I can load something that like a 38 plus P 135 grain gold dot, which is going to be a superb defensive load for human beings. Now, in the case of the sales dude that I was talking to, maybe I don't want to shoot it all the time because it can be a little bit, it'll wear you out. Like I've got arthritis pretty bad, probably from, the big contributor is shooting too many Magnum rounds for too many years at a 357 full house, 44s, things like that. But if you limit that and you do it smart, which I didn't do smart, but at any rate, I can take that same gun, use the snake shot, use the wad cutters, use the 38 plus P defensive loads, use the target, use it for targets because they're very accurate guns. And then I load the 357 Magnums in there, and I have a specific, maybe I want it to be bear or moose defense, something like that. I can load a round into that gun that was going to shoot through feet of animal or ballistic gel instead of inches where we normally measure that. So there isn't anything else in the gun world that has that level of versatility. So what I tend to use the revolvers for, like I have several that I will take deer hunting. One of my guns is very accurate. I will use specifically to hunt deer with. And I have taken it backpacking and I load heavier loads in it in case I run into a bear. And then I can put, I have a speed loader, a 38 plus P. If I go into town and I'm worried about using that gun for a defensive gun, I'll drop the 38 plus P into the same gun. And this gun I'm familiar with it. I can shoot it really accurately. One of the advantages the revolvers is a lot of people aren't familiar. B8s have made a comeback, and a lot of people are 25-yard B8. They're chasing a hundo. Hey, I got a 99. Hey, I got a 98. And there's a lot of people brag about the guns that they have that they do this with, like Staccato's the new hotness. But people forget that it used to be you could buy a plain vanilla Model 15 Smith & Wesson, Model 10 Smith & Wesson, and any random box of target wad cutters, and you could shoot that level of accuracy on B8s at the 25-yard line that it currently, a lot of people are spending $2,000, $3,000 on a pistol to get similar levels of accuracy that used to be mundane, plain vanilla, over-the-counter stuff. So the versatility of the revolver, and specifically the 357 Magnum for my uses, I would feel comfortable carrying a small to medium frame 357 revolver loaded appropriately with 38s or 357 Magnum ammo, target shooting with beginners, small game hunting, whacking varmints and snakes, defensive use in the big city, hiking in Alaska. So the versatility you get out of that gun is what is really, really key. And I'm not worried about bullshit that I know to be not that important, like it doesn't have a 24-round magazine, whatever. The number one reason to need to reload is missing. So one of the things I mentioned Keith Jones before. He did a kind of a study at his job when he was there, and this was in the revolver days. And he's like, you know what? I think we should get semi-autos. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up our shootings and find these incidents where cops ran out of ammo and they got killed in the streets. And this will justify why I think we need to get semi-autos. So over a 20-year period of Metro Indiana or Indianapolis, he looked up shootings. He had 197 of them, if I remember the math right. And in all of those, in the revolver days, there was one dude that needed to reload. One dude. So the things we talk about today that all come together in that is, we talked about 22s and shooting straight and bullets hitting to the sights and things like that. So if you can shoot straight with a bullet that penetrates deeply enough, that's the big part of the problem. And most people, it's failing to hit that is the real issue, not that you haven't chosen the correct bullet or whatever. So the other thing I like about revolvers is double action revolvers. You get a lot of dry fire without having to reset and that sort of thing. So that's another advantage out of the system is how much dry fire that you can get out of the system, which is free practice, and then various like ball and dummy skip loading, things like that. So it all, when you look at it as a package and the versatility, there's very few things in life that give you the versatility of a 357 Magnum revolver.
Good stuff.
I think our muscular, we've gotten lazy on the hand muscles. I've done some revolver classes the last couple, exactly. Done the last revolver classes the last few years. Everybody's carrying nines. Then we do a 6-hour or whatever class on revolvers, and their trigger hands going to crap on them about halfway through. It's like, oh my gosh, my hand, I can hardly my hand. We've gotten sawed because they haven't done double action trigger pulls for so long, and I'm sure us guys here are running revolvers. It's like, I run my revolver 2-3 times a week. So I was like, man, I'm getting, hands staying in shape.
You guys are old enough to remember. You remember how part of the testing to get onto a lot of police agencies was a minimum number of trigger presses with both hands was a standard. And that kind of went away when they started hiring itty bitty little police people that didn't have that level of hand strength. But a lot of agencies would require that you had to do like, I don't remember what it was, like 60 trigger pulls in a minute or two or whatever, that you had to have an ability to do that. And I think that was helpful. The other thing, one of the things Chuck and I talk about a lot with people, because there's this whole stupid revolver reliability thing that goes around that they're not reliable. No, they're not when you take them to a 500 round pistol course. So they're not designed to do that. Where they tend to be reliable is when the first load, and generally whatever you're carrying as spares, which is usually 1 to 2 spare reloads, with a clean functioning revolver. I have not seen many or any cases where they didn't all go bang. And under the circumstances where all we need to do is start pulling body cam video and looking at how many malfunctions we're seeing in police shootings, because these guns are being shot in space. And we have stopped teaching isometric gripping of the handgun. We're using bone muscle structure, which is why I'm a big advocate of you have to be able to shoot both Weaver and ISO, but that's another podcast. My car guns, which is my modern take on where I usually have something like this in the car with me. And there's a reason for that. I will argue to the end of days with any of the tactical geniuses, put me in a car with a gun and I want a revolver every time, because you are going to be shooting from asymmetric positions. You are going to be shooting in space. That gun will often not be locked like it needs to function. Most of the modern semi-autos, the ammunition does not function the gun. My trigger finger functions the gun. And as long as I have quality ammunition in there, I don't care if it's upside down, sideways, rolling around, in whatever the issue is. If somebody is trying to rip you out of your vehicle, you are not going to have a stable shooting platform to be running your defense from. And I will take the wheel gun every time for that, because I know I'm going to get all 5 or 6 out of the gun. And at contact distance, hitting window, pillars, all of the stuff that goes bad in a car tends to be all the places that revolvers work.
You don't have to worry about pressing the muzzle in on something and having the slide, disconnect the gun.
The beauty of these things is they work exceptionally well when the muzzle's inserted into what you want to hit. It's a very good accuracy enhancer. And then you add, a lot of these rounds with the muzzle blast that goes with them and everything coming out of the gun. So they do have a place in modern defensive handgunning, particularly for those not in the business of responding to other people's emergencies. When the only goal of that gun is to protect you from being robbed at a street level robbery thing, or to provide you a means of escape, in that parameter, the revolver is still a very, very viable tool that a lot of people don't understand. And especially with the simplistic administrative handling and the ability to shoot when you're in less than optimal positions for most people, I think that's still an advantage. So, and yeah. I'm kind of with you, Chuck. I got to get up too. Yeah. So I think most of us are winding down, but yeah.
Outstanding discussion. Absolutely. This was outstanding. And I look forward to editing this, because that means I re-listen. The first hour where the show didn't officially start is going to have a couple bits that I'm going to take out and use for different videos. But the main topic, we've been going over 2 hours. This has been outstanding. The sad thing about this, though, people are going to say, "Oh, 357, nah, skip." There's some awesome history here. Mm-hmm. One concept I want to reiterate that you guys mentioned, and Steve specifically focused on briefly, was talking about that sweet spot of ammunition with projectile performance, velocity, weight. Mathematically, we can take something super heavy and have it slow. And mathematically, if we do a formula, it's going to come up with the same number as the thing with the sweet spot. It doesn't, that number doesn't necessarily mean velocity times mass. It's not interchangeable that you can just make, super light, but super, super, super fast. That doesn't mean it's going to work very well. There is a sweet spot, and people are falling for snake oil on a regular basis with the super light, super fast ammunition, and it's not doing what you're hoping. There's a window of effectiveness, and this is both. And this is with semi-autos. This is with revolvers, but this is unfortunately something that's greatly misunderstood, because I don't think people they're paying more attention to advertising than they are to the facts or tests. I just want to reiterate that because I thought that was important. The whole discussion's been fantastic. Before we go to final thoughts and plugs, and guys, when you're giving your final thoughts, plug whatever you want, anything that you represent, anything that you're a fan of. You, the listener or viewer, make sure you're supporting those sources that you have found to be beneficial. These guys are going to talk about who they represent, who they are, the companies they run, the companies they associate with. Check them out. If you like what these guys had to say, follow them on social media. If they've shared insights with you that have the potential of, well, that have changed your insights positively, they deserve a subscription. They deserve a follow. They deserve something. Definitely shares, likes, and that goes with everything primary and secondary. The algorithms on social media, that's on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all those do not work in our favor. And when I say our favor, I mean it's anything that's related to gun topics, gun rights, firearms themselves, training, any of this. So ultimately, and this is a big task, and it's also a big ask. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share, because the services that we're using to spread these good ideas definitely is not helping us. And so we're not getting that reach that other content is getting. We're definitely a lot more on the educational side than entertaining. However, today's couple-hour discussion was a combination of both educational and very entertaining. Great stuff. So final thoughts, final plugs, Chuck Haggard.
So you always remind me to point out my websites.
Yes.
Agile Training and Consulting, agiletactical.com. Anybody with any interest in any of this, like I know Caleb just did a revolver class someplace out east. Darryl does his training. I do the training. There's other gurus out there, Wayne Dobbs, Mark Freaky, stuff like that. But if you're interested in that, there's really high quality training to be had. To reiterate what we talked about, just because something's old doesn't mean it's not useful. And then I think some of this knowledge is being lost in some of the hype that's out there. People focus on what's, kind of new and exciting and cool and things like that instead of what's really important. One of the reasons I like the subject matter we had here is I don't think everything always has to be serious. So 357 revolvers cover, defensive uses. It's serious as a heart attack, deadly force. That's why they were invented. They also do hunting. They also do target shooting. They do plinking. So they're both fun and serious. So I tell anybody that's a serious shooter, even if you're not a revolver person, you really should have a 357 and a 22 revolver in your battery because of the uses that you can have for those tools in training and just fun, and then some of the serious uses you can have for them. So that's my sales pitch.
Good stuff. And we didn't even touch. Okay, we talked a bit about development. We talked about applications. Didn't really talk that much about shortcoming and diminishing returns. We did talk about the barrel length issue. Didn't talk about lever action. Talked a little bit about ammo.
Volume 2.
Yes, absolutely. Optimal barrel lengths. And the one topic that I thought of as we were talking was new tech, but using old designs. So
I tried to hit on that when I pointed out how much 357 Magnum out of a carbine picks up crazy amounts of velocity. So when we were talking about bullet performance, you're going to have to pick a bullet. If your bullet has a design velocity for 1,200 feet per second, and now you're launching it out of a carbine, it's doing 1,800 feet per second. That's kind of a big deal. So having some education on bullet selection for that versatility is it's important to be an educated user.
Yeah. Someone, as a matter of fact, it was one of our regular listeners, supporters, said maybe we need another revolver episode, cover history of other Magnums and their uses. Absolutely. Love to talk about 44 and 44 Special. And I blame Darryl for my liking of that. Speaking of Darryl.
Hardwired Tactical Shooting's the business side. Just follow that one on Facebook. Don't go to the website. We don't really own it anymore. We're a bit into reorganization and moving the corporation to another state. But on Facebook, Hardwired Tactical Shooting. My stuff is under DB's Shooting Adventures on both Facebook and Instagram. If you haven't heard it already, the Pat Rogers was a dear mentor of mine. We did a lot of revolver stuff together, and memorialize and pat at the Pat Rogers Memorial Revolver Roundup in Gunsight. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving in November. The instructor cadre we bring there, we just added Bruce Cartwright, which is, I think, the only FBI agent that Pat liked a lot, because we have enough students to add more instructors. It's one of the only places you can now go where a vast majority of the instructors actually hunted felons for real with wheel guns, and literally at some of the worst crime periods we've ever had. So we are very proud of the instructor cadre we have, that everybody is truly a experienced expert in the blocks that they teach, even down to guys like Caleb, who's teaching competitive speed shooting. He is exceptionally good at that. Bryan Eastridge is doing a lot of PPC stuff. Most people don't know that Bryan is a NRA distinguished PPC shooter. So if you want to learn how to shoot a revolver accurately, there's not a lot of those out there. Everybody gets wiggly over USPSA GMs. Compare the number of GMs to NRA distinguished PPC guys, and you're going to see a vast number difference. So real proud of that event. I teach with Chuck and Cecil Birch. We do our non-permissive environment counter robbery classes, which tend to be small revolver centric.
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
We got another one in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we could use a couple more students in Grandview, Texas. So get a hold of through Immediate Action Combatives with Cecil Birch is doing the signups on that. Revolver Roundup. And, we just like doing this stuff. Yeah. If you follow me on DB Shooting Adventures on both Facebook and Instagram, I've been whatever they call it that the social media does to you, where only your followers can see it. Go ahead and follow it. I put a lot of revolver content up there, and that's what we do. We do a lot of this. We do it. We still are carrying these guns a lot and training with them, and are happy to spread the knowledge around to people who don't have the ability to get it, or they're getting information from people who, I've been carrying a revolver for 3 years, so I'm an expert. Probably not. So that's kind of what we're about.
Good stuff. Steve?
Well, nobody knows me.
I do.
We do.
Yeah. It's quick. 27 years law enforcement, retired about 8 years ago. Taught at our academy in Washington State up here, and was on a cadre about 5-6 people that rewrote the academy curriculum. Don't know what it is now, so I can't. Started in law enforcement in '87, like I said, in Park Service Academy, and we carried Model 10s. And then Sheriff's Office 686. I was in 2 shootings with a revolver, both one-shot stops with a 158 Grand Remington.
Cool.
Retired 8 years ago, got 2 businesses. One is Cerberus Training Group, is a firearms training company out of here in Eastern Washington. The other one is I started about 5 years ago as High Desert Cartridge Company. When I retired, wanted to make sure that law enforcement people had ammunition to train with, and it was reasonably priced and readily available, and got into it just before COVID. And it was crazy. I had, 40, 50 orders all the time. It was so bad. I got this call from South Side Chicago SWAT looking for ammo. And I'm going, how'd you hear about me? It's like, just searching the net, man. Just searching the net, trying to find ammo to train our guys. So I packed up a couple of pallets of ammo for them and shipped them back to Chicago for them. But I really met Darryl down at the primary and secondary summit, both years. I think it was it the second year, Darryl, you did the guns of Bonnie and Clyde?
Yeah, I think it was the second year.
It was a good presentation.
Yeah.
But it just got me. I've been having revolvers, obviously all my career, but I get poo-pooed because there's not enough revolver guys up here, right? Around where I'm at. And so when you did that, so I brought 2 of my instructors down with me, and they were listening to that. I just looked at them. I gloated the whole weekend at them about revolvers and some of this stuff. So you guys have no idea. Of course, I'm old enough to be their father, but it is what it is. Yeah, so High Desert Cartridge Company, I'm open. I'm small enough company to where, like with Darryl, to develop loads for certain things. I don't make a lot of different calibers. We make 9 and 3 different weights, 115, 124 is 147 subsonic, 38, 357, 45 auto, and then 223. But if you're needing something specific, as long as it's going to be a long run, I run Mark 7's automated machines, and it takes about a half a day to retool one of them things. But, with Darryl, it was something I wanted to do because he was making posts on his Facebook about some ammo and not having problems, whatever. It's like, hey, I met this guy twice. He might remember me. I don't know. If not, I'll reintroduce myself. And I'm small enough to where I can do that, make loads. I mean, I tailor-made some stuff for Kyle DeFore, and I work with Bill Blowers, Bill Rapier, Travis Kennedy, and Chad Robichaux. Did loads for all those guys, and not real well known out in public realm as I am more in the industry. Did some stuff for Steve Fisher, some subsonic for him. Jared Reston. I tried, Jared, if you're watching the pod, I tried, but you know what? It's just not made for an 11.5-inch barrel, man. That's right. But yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, High Desert Cartridge Company and Service Training Group. Have at me, whatever.
Awesome. Maybe we do need to have an episode just about ammo. I actually I sent out an invite to Mark Fricky because you guys mentioned him. Like, I forgot to add him.
He's in the Bahamas.
Okay, because he's messaging me right now.
Their National Police Department. Mark's doing some pretty insane work right now.
Okay.
But if I can just add real quick, like with Steve with the ammo, it took a while to develop this load of a lot of going back and forth, and Steve would load stuff and we'd test it, load it, and test it, load it. And a lot of companies aren't willing to do that. So it is it's almost all I exclusively shoot now. I so enjoy now taking a Model 28 out, or one of my 3.5-inch 27s is 2.5-inch 19 is getting the crap shot out of it because of Steve's ammo.
Yeah.
And it has been a fun ride of finding that sweet spot, but it takes some work to find that. And these things, somebody posted on the net and everybody's like, well, that just sounds like a 38 special in a 357 Magnum case. Why would you ever do that? And it's like, people are lost on the reason for this stuff. These guns, I'll give a perfect example on this 2.5-inch 19. Actually wouldn't eject a lot of the stuff when I first got it because they had so much lead buildup at the end of the cylinder that it took a while to kick all of that stuff out, burn it out, cut it out, do it with, and now these loads, go in and out of the gun flawlessly. They shoot great. So, again, ammo selection's important, but you have to have kind of the right people telling you what that is versus gun and ammo companies and social media influencers. So Steve's product is really good. I'm really impressed with it. And it is literally specially designed for people who like to train on these guns. So
I've also working with Darryl. I haven't started back and forth with it, but it's coming, Darryl. The 148.
I didn't want to mention it until it's done, but we are working on something in 38. So
cool. Well, and then also
everybody,
you've kind of not given up. You've reduced your shooting of full Magnum rounds just due to arthritis. Yeah.
These are literally rounds I can shoot.
Yeah.
In 357 Magnum guns without that the gun,
the side effects. Yeah.
Without that. And Steve and I are starting on a kind of a new idea for a 38 snub load.
Cool.
So that's just a little different from anything else that's out there. So
it's super lightweight and super fast.
No.
No.
It's I like doing this with Darryl because I've got some, like he's got, I've got some older Smiths and antique, like he mentioned, these things are out of warranty.
Yeah.
They go.
Good
You
point.
can't replace them.
Good point.
And so there's a lot of people out there that want to shoot these older Smiths or whatever, these things from 50, 50, longer than that, 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago, whatever. And they're afraid to. Well, now you can.
Awesome. Well, huge thank you to the panel. Awesome discussion. Truly. Big thank you to the Patreon subscribers. If you happen to be a Patreon supporter of Network Support or greater, you have the opportunity to watch these live. You can bring up questions if you have them. We'll address them in the show. Have chat going. It's kind of nice to see these live because also you're seeing it completely unedited. We've been going since 6, so it's been 3 hours and 40 minutes. The final episode is not going to be 3 hours and 40 minutes. Final episodes is probably going to be 2 hours and 40-ish minutes. There was a whole hour before we even started where we were talking about all kinds of other stuff. And it was a wonderful discussion. That's one of the perks of being a Patreon subscriber, just so you know. If you go to patreon.com/primary and secondary, that's where it all starts. Getting on the live shows starts at Network Support. That's $5 a month. $5 a month gets you all that. Additionally, there are different tiers, different benefits. Additionally, big thanks to our sponsors, Big Tex Ordnance, Overwatch Precision, Filster, Primary Arms, Walther. Again, fantastic discussion. We had an awesome all-star panel. I suspect next episode we will get Mark Fricky on with us next time we talk about more revolver stuff. I have a bunch of different topics that are in queue. Just a matter of herding those cats. Really excited about some of the explosive breaching one, or just breaching in general. Less lethal one will be very interesting. I talked to one of the SWAT leaders this morning about a incident they responded to and effectively used a FN 303, a non-pepper. Just basically they were shooting marbles at the guy and it was effective. Just thought that's kind of cool. The whole house was doused in CS and they came in with gas masked, and it was an effective usage and no one was killed or injured. So good stuff. It's cool to have options. So I think that's pretty much it. The next episode that will be going live the next episode that will be available on YouTube and in audio form will be the financial crimes episode, defense against financial crimes. That will probably be released this upcoming Friday or Saturday. Obviously, though, if you're listening to this, that was last week. This episode will be released next week. So I think that's pretty much everything I have. I'm going to go and stay up all night now because I'm on Graves. So we'll talk to you guys later.